Hi, welcome to Imperium Learning. In this particular video we're going to be covering the Johansen cointegration test and how to conduct it using Eviews. Before I actually start showing you how to conduct the test on Eviews, I want to spend at least 5 or 6 minutes just introducing you to the concept of cointegration. I also want to spend a bit of time just making sure that you have, at the very least, a brief understanding of the format of the test. Also want to make sure that you are aware of the two test statistics that are generated when you apply the Johansen test. I'll also talk about how to determine the optimal lag length when you're applying the Johansen test to your non-stationary variables. And finally, I'll also be talking about how you end up deciding how many cointegrating relations you have between your selected non-stationary variables. So, just taking a very quick look at this first PowerPoint slide, you can see that that the key word in this first bullet point is non-stationary. In other words, you'll have to have already applied unit root tests. I've got a number of videos about those, so if you haven't seen those, check them out. And so making sure that they're non-stationary, because the Johansen test is only really applicable to non-stationary unit root processes. The second thing is, what is cointegration? Well, I've got a nice little quote there, a nice concise quote, which is just basically that cointegration exists when there's a linear combination of two or more non-stationary variables that actually become stationary. And so just a few tips when you're applying this test. When I was reading online, you should have at least 5 years worth of data in your sample range, or 60 months. In my particular example, which I'll be doing on Eviews, my particular variables go from sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. My particular variables have a sample range from the end of 1992 and go all the way down to March of 2018. So that's 102 observations, because I'm using quarterly data. So particularly when the frequency of your data isn't high, so if you've got like monthly or sorry, if you have quarterly or annual data, you'll need to have a lot of years of data to make sure that the Johansen test can analyze your data properly. So bear in mind that cointegration is very important for the long run information. That's the long run relationships between variables, which would be lost if we estimated just a standard vector autoregressive model, a VAR model, and we were to simply apply we were simply to estimate a VAR model on the first difference of our non-stationary variables. So hopefully that's quite easy to understand. If it's not, I'm sure it will sink in the more you think about it. But anyway, just moving on to the format of the Johansen test. It looks a bit complicated, but I've tried my best to break it down into an easily understood format. So as you can see, this is the general format. It's actually a system of equations. This is very important to understand. So essentially, you are doing a test where each variable ends up becoming the dependent variable. So just to give you an idea of what that is, I'll be doing the Johansen test using 5 variables. So that means in my system of equations I would have the average house price, credit, the money supply, the interest rate, and the unemployment rate. That's in my particular example. And as you can see here, this is just a column vector. This coefficient, however, is a G times G matrix. This again is just a column vector. In my particular case, as I've just shown you, I have 5 variables in total that are non-stationary. So G in my example would equal 5. Hopefully that that clarifies things again. So this is a standard VAR model right here, and in order to conduct the test, you transform it into a vector error correction model. And again, the format is pretty similar to the vector error correction model. I don't think you really need to know this from a practical point of view, because obviously Eviews just does it all for you, but you might have a piece of coursework where you're expected to sort of set out the test, and I think this is a good way of just making sure you include that in your essay. Now just bear in mind that this particular matrix, this G times G matrix, in my case this will be a 5 times 5 matrix. This is the most important one, the most important matrix. Basically it's just showing you how to we take a look at this matrix, and what we do is we calculate the rank of the matrix via its eigenvalues, and the rank of a matrix is equal to the number of eigenvalues that are different to 0. So just bear that in mind. Obviously as well, the Johansen test involves determining an optimal lag length. Well, as you can see here, we've got the steps for determining the optimal lag length for your Johansen test. You estimate a basic VAR model with all non-stationary variables at level, and then you choose the lag length which minimizes your chosen information criterion. Now I in particular will be using the Schwartz information criterion. Finally, very quickly, there are 2 types of test statistics that are produced from applying this test. There's the trace test and the max test. This is how the trace test is. This is how the test statistic is produced, and this is obviously the format of the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. You can pause the video here just to try and digest that if you want. This is also the format for the max test. And then now I think I'm actually not gonna focus on that right now. I think I'm actually going to wrap up the video right here, because I'm already 9 minutes in and I can only record for 10-minute segments. So I'm gonna wrap up this video here. Hopefully I've given you a brief introduction to the Johansen test, why it's important, why you apply it, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to apply it on Eviews, and there are some interesting results in my specific example, and they might be applicable to your situation. So you should watch the second video as well as a follow-up to learn about how to apply this test on Eviews. If you thought this was a good video, don't hesitate to subscribe and give a thumbs up to show your support to the channel. It's always very good for me. Okay, bye now.